Right, we are back here on the GSMC Baseball Podcast, bringing you our third segment, and that, of course, being what you see on the screen here, Zack Wheeler and him signing an extension with the Philadelphia Phillies. So, just going over this quickly, I thought Zack Wheeler signing an extension with the Phillies was fairly likely from the start. Everything we've heard is that he's very happy in Philly. The Phillies were very happy to have him. Of course, signing with the Phillies, he has turned into one of the best. He has turned into one of the best pitchers in baseball since signing there. One of the most successful free agent signings, in baseball since the in the 21st century. I think it made a lot of sense for Zack Wheeler to go there. Just talking to the chat a little bit. The guys commenting, yes, this is live. I'm live right now, so hello. Sorry for the audio listeners. They don't know what I'm talking about. But, keeping on with Zack Wheeler. It made a lot of sense for the Phillies to extend him with the amount of success he has had in Philadelphia. I thought it just, I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry. Signing him is a great deal for the Phillies in the future. You get him, you solidify that rotation with him and Nola for years to come. The extension you gave was the biggest contract extension in baseball history for average annual value, and I think Zack Wheeler deserves it. Coming over to the Phillies from the Mets. There's a lot of doubt put on Zack Wheeler's name. A lot of people didn't really expect him to kind of live up to the contract. He got $100 million over 5 years. It's a huge contract for a guy who hadn't really proved himself. Had a lot of potential, but I think really did prove himself with that Phillies contract. Definitely deserves this. Was happy in Philly. The Phillies were happy there with him. So I definitely think it made a lot of sense for him to extend. $42 million over 3 years is an incredible amount of money for a pitcher especially. But again, he definitely deserves it. He's become one of the faces of that Phillies franchise, and I really do love this contract for the Phillies. Even though it is a lot of money, again, Wheeler deserves it. He's such a good pitcher, probably a top 3 pitcher in baseball right now. And also looking for the long-term outlook of this, let's say you don't extend Wheeler, you lose him next offseason. What's going to happen then? There are pitchers available who we're going to talk about after in the next free agent class, but other than that, you have Nola as your ace, which is fine, but you're taking a big step back from the past where you've had Nola and Wheeler in the playoffs, which has guided you to the World Series. So it would have been a big step back for your team. So it's good to get the extension done now. Also, not put it into the rest of the season. So to get this out of the way, not get him distracted. And I think it made a ton of sense. Again, and I love the deal for the Phillies. I love the deal for Wheeler. Getting that bag, great for him. As a Mets fan, I'm really happy for him that he found a home. We didn't really treat him right there. Our GN's comments, Brody Van Wagenen, when he did leave, was pretty unprofessional, and I'm glad he proved a lot of people wrong. And even though he is on the Phillies, I'm glad he has turned into one of the better pitchers in baseball. He had so much potential coming over from the Giants in that Carlos Beltran trade to the Mets. Never really lived up to it to the Mets for whatever reason. Maybe it was organizational incompetence, injuries, stuff like that. But I think great deal for the Phillies. Great job to get this done. Great job to give me some news to talk about. So I'm glad about that. Looking at the Phillies, I still think they need to do something for this offseason. Extending Wheeler, re-signing Nola, great moves. But at the same time, it's still the same as last year. These are the guys you had on the team last year, not really improving. I don't think Whit Merrifield and Spencer Turnbull are the guys that are going to, automatically put you in contention status. It was, I still think the Phillies need to make a move here. I've had them getting Jordan Montgomery. They've been mentioned there. I think it makes a lot of sense for them to get Montgomery. Looking at this team right now, you have a good rotation now of Wheeler, Nola, Ranger Suarez, Taijuan Walker. You hope can bounce back. Christopher Sanchez, who's nice, going to fill into number 5. You have guys like Griff McGarry. You have McAble, who could potentially fill in the rotation, top prospects. I think I think the Phillies are going to be good for the rotation this year. Your bullpen may need a little bit of work. I think it's still pretty good, but you could add one or two guys always. I mean, it's the bullpen for baseball. You always can. The lineup, of course, is excellent. I mean, JT Realmuto, Bryce Harper, Bryson Stott, Trey Turner, Alec Boehm, Brandon Marsh, Johan Rojas, Nick Castellanos, Kyle Schwarber. Just the amount of hitting talent there is incredible. You have the younger guy like Johan Rojas, who I definitely think is an X factor, who can definitely affect that team in a lot of good ways. So, yeah, glad for the Phillies to get this extension done. Glad for Zack Wheeler to get this extension done. And, just good for all parties to get this done. You don't want it lingering into the season. It definitely affects players whether they want to admit it or not if you are talking contracts in the season. And, it's a huge contract. Again, the biggest contract extension in baseball history off AAV. But Wheeler definitely deserves it. How he's shown himself, as being one of the better pitchers in baseball, for a little while now since coming over to Philly. So, great move for the Phillies, and glad this is happening. So what I wanted to pivot to now for this segment as well is talking about how does this affect next year's free agent class for specifically starting pitching. Of course, people have been looking at Wheeler now for the past year or two as the top guy of the starting pitchers in the free agent class. A lot of teams who wanted starting pitchers next offseason, I think we're looking at Wheeler as a guy they could potentially sign. But now, obviously, he is off the market. So I think you have to look at the other guys as well. You first, of course, have Corbin Burnes, the newest Baltimore Oriole. So, I think this definitely helps his market a lot. I think a lot more teams are going to be desperate to give him a big contract now that Wheeler's off the market. I look at teams who could get a big free agent starting pitcher next year as first. Of course, you have to look at the Mets with how much money they have to spend with the amount of question marks they have in their rotation for the next year with the contract situations. I think Corbin Burnes going there would make a lot of sense. You also have the connection with David Stearns from Milwaukee. I think you also have to look at the Yankees, who could definitely use a big starting pitcher if Rodon doesn't work out, if Stroman doesn't work out, if they don't sign Snell Montgomery. You have the Orioles, his current team right now. If it does work out there, I'd expect him to go hard at re-signing him. But I don't think Burnes is going to give a hometown discount, quote-unquote. I definitely think he's going to go for the biggest payday possible, as he should. When you're at that level of pitcher, you definitely should. And, I'm hoping he does. You also have teams who could get him. You have teams like the Astros, who may have some question marks in their rotation next year, who want to spend big again on another former Brewer. Obviously, they got Josh Hader, so maybe he could recruit his former teammate, Corbin Burnes, to H-Town. You have the Rangers, who are going to need some starting pitching, have some guys coming off the books next year, could potentially sign him. You have, of course, you have other teams like the Cubs, who I definitely think could be a fit, the Reds, Diamondbacks. A ton of teams could be in use for Corbin Burnes next year, and I think he's going to be much more in play now with a lot more teams because the fact that Zack Wheeler is off the market. You only have him and one other elite starting pitcher on the market, who I'm going to get to. I definitely think this helps Corbin Burnes' market a lot. It's going to be interesting to see how it affects it when it does come to free agency for next year, and what's going to happen with that. So, next, of course, we have to talk about the guy I was talking about before, the other elite starting pitcher on the market, and that is Max Fried. Again, he's kind of in the same camp as Burnes, elite starting pitcher was on the market for next offseason. I think he's going to be a lot more in demand now. I don't think he's re-signing with the Braves. I would be very surprised if he does. I think this is last year with them, just for the fact that they don't really give big contracts in free agency. They kind of try to extend their players early, and if they don't want to be extended, they just let them walk in free agency. And I think that's what's going to happen with Fried here. I'm not sure how comfortable Anthopoulos is with giving a long-term contract to a starting pitcher. So I think Fried, kind of the same teams I mentioned with Burnes. You have teams like the Mets. You have teams like the Padres, Yankees, Cubs, Astros, teams like that who could be looking for a top starting pitcher. I think that they can make a lot of sense for Max Fried and signing him. As we do know, he grew up a huge Dodgers fan in LA. He Meritor's curveball from Sandy Koufax, the Dodgers legend. So I think the Dodgers made a lot of sense for Fried. But the fact if they sign Yamamoto, they extended Glasnow, they have Ohtani, of course, who's going to be pitching next year most likely. So I don't think they're a fit, but I think you have to look at West Coast teams for Fried. I think the Padres make a lot of sense as a team that could look for Fried. I still think the Mets do, even though it is East Coast. I think they're going to go hard for a big starting pitcher next year. I do think they're going to go hard for big Fried in general, and I think it could be a starting pitcher. It could be a guy like Juan Soto, of course, Alex Bregman, or one of the starting pitchers like Corbin Burns, like Max Fried. So you got to look at that here. But yeah, I think Wheeler coming off the market definitely helps Burns and Burns and Fried's market. Now teams have less options because you can't sign Zack Wheeler, who undoubtedly is the best of these three that I've been mentioning, him, Burns, and Fried. Teams are going to be getting big contracts to Corbin Burns, to Max Fried. There's going to be I think there's going to be a bidding war with some of these guys as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what happens next offseason with these guys and what's going to happen there. And yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens next offseason with them and how they are affected, Burns, Fried, and what kind of contracts they do get, what teams are going after them. So, yeah, I mean, I think looking at this Wheeler extension, you have to look at how it affects next year because he was slated to be a free agent next year, because he probably was going to be getting a lot of attention as a free agent. So, yeah, definitely interesting to talk about. Going back to the Phillies now, just quickly before we end this segment, I still think they're kind of the same place. I still think they need to add a big free agent like Montgomery, or maybe even a Snell, maybe even a JD Martinez. I don't know how that would work, but just listing guys here. So, yeah, I mean, just Philly's still a good team, but again, I said it before. I think they're in the second tier of teams, as not immediate World Series contenders. Kind of just guys teams we know are going to be in the playoffs. I think they should look to add one more guy. I'm not sure how the Wheeler extension affects that because the money is next year, but it's definitely something to think about. It's definitely something to think about with the Phillies, what's going on with them this year and the future as well, the outlook for next year's free agency as well. So, yeah, definitely something to think about and definitely something to talk about. So, yeah, that's our third segment here. We're going to be going to our fourth segment, which is going to be about news around the league. Just general news stories I want to talk about, what's going on there. We'll be talking about that, but first we'll be going to our third break and our final break. So, yeah, we'll be talking about it after the break. So, see you then. Bye.